Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines. In a slew of measures announced to boost economic sentiment, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on Friday rolled back the surcharge levied on FPIs for capital gains made in equity markets. Public sector banks will be in focus today after the Finance Minister announced upfront transfer of recapitalization worth 70,000 crore rupees in order to bolster credit offtake. Trade tensions between the US and China have escalated yet again after US President Donald Trump said that he regrets not having imposed higher tariffs on China from the onset. The Central Board of the Reserve Bank of India will consider the Bimal Jalan Committee report at its board meeting today, according to an official aware of the development. And former Finance Minister Arun Jaitley was laid to rest on Sunday with full state honours. Jaitley passed away on Saturday after a prolonged illness. On to the big global story. US President Donald Trump sharply escalated the trade war with China by raising tariffs on various Chinese products. But he has one regret. He believes that he should have gone with higher tariffs from the start. That's based on a clarification issued by the White House to a statement made by the president earlier. Ross Cranzi and Tom McKenzie of Bloomberg News bring you more details.
President Trump essentially said today that regrets he had a few, and a lot of people immediately took that to mean perhaps he didn't want to go as hard on China. He's always very sensitive to the stock market falling, and it certainly tumbled on Friday. But in fact, Stephanie Grisham came out and said, if anything, he regrets that he hasn't raised tariffs higher and maybe earlier. So that's a little bit of a worry to markets. It seemed like on Friday, Trump was very much taken aback by China's retaliatory move on tariffs, even though I think most people had expected them to make a move for a couple of weeks. And he really hastily convened a meeting at the White House, and now we've seen the result. So at this point, people are very rattled by the idea that President Trump may sort of invoke a national emergency decree to try to force U.S. businesses to get out of China. That's kind of a nuclear option, I think, for the U.S., and a lot of concern about that here.
Yeah, and of course, we are seeing Beijing also take a harder stance. Tom, what has China been saying about all of this?
Well, really, China continues to stick to its playbook when it comes to how it responds to these trade actions from the US. So it implemented or announced the implementation of $75 billion worth of additional tariffs. In terms of the timing, by the way, that would be split between the 1st of September and December the 15th, so in two different tranches. And that was in response to the announcement from the US, of course, 3 weeks previously, that there would be additional tariffs on another $300 billion worth of Chinese goods. So you have the retaliation from the Chinese side in terms of the tariffs, hitting back blow for blow, and then you have an escalation of the rhetoric, and that's what we saw in the state media. So you had the likes of the Global Times saying that now there was serious work underway, serious preparations for these tensions to continue to escalate, a further deterioration in relations between the US and China. The editor of the Global Times, this nationalistic but influential tabloid newspaper here, saying that the US risked losing China, and pointing to not just the tariffs but also the banning of Huawei, the actions, the US actions when it came to Hong Kong and Taiwan, other geopolitical issues as well. And then you had the Commerce Ministry coming out on Saturday accusing the US of bullying, trade protectionism, bullying. The state media here saying that China will fight these tariffs and this trade war until the end. So certainly the rhetoric is ratcheting up. In terms of the response, it's been a hitting back blow for blow rather than trying to overreach.
All right, now U.S. equities had a sharply negative reaction to President Trump's latest statements. Stocks that were rallying post-Fed Chair Jerome Powell's comments at Jackson Hole took a nosedive post Trump's series of tweets. Now, benchmark indices posted their fourth straight weekly loss. The Dow Jones and the S&P 500 fell over 2% each, while the Nasdaq fell the most with cuts of 3%. And that same negative sentiment has crossed over to Asia this morning as well. If I look at the markets that opened up in the early trade, you have the three early rises, the Nikkei, the Australian benchmark and the Kospi. All of them were trading with sharp cuts. In fact, the Nikkei is now trading with sharper cuts, down about 2.4%. You have the Chinese markets that have opened up for trade and they're negative as well, understandably so. The Hang Seng down with cuts of over 3% at the start of trade for now. We'll have to see how that pans out over the course of the day. Of course, it's early hours and early minutes for some of those markets. But let's turn focus now to domestic developments. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on Friday evening announced several measures to revive sentiment in the economy. From restoring surcharge or removing the surcharge on FPIs to pre-budget levels, recapitalization for PSU banks, the presentation had it all. Here are the 10 key highlights from Friday evening's press conference.
The enhanced surcharge on FPI goes. In simple words. In other words, the pre-budget position is restored. Surcharge on domestic investors too in the equity market goes. Pre-budget position is restored. There is no intention of the government to go on the prosecution route. CSR will only be treated as a civil matter and not at all as a criminal matter. Upfront, we are releasing the 70,000 crores and additional lending and liquidity to the tune of 5 lakh crores can be made available by providing this upfront capital for the PSBs. Banks have now decided to pass on any rate cut through the MCLR reduction to benefit all borrowers. Banks again have decided to launch repo rate or external benchmarking linked loan products. Only a few days ago, the governor of Reserve Bank had spoken about it. He was talking about institutionalizing this mechanism, was also still hoping that the banks would work on it. Now, banks have agreed to do this. This will therefore result in reduced EMI for housing loans, vehicles and other retail loans by directly linking repo rate to the interest rates, which means the moment the reduction has happened, it will directly benefit the customers, end customers. Working capital loans for industry will also become cheaper as a result. More credit support for purchase of houses, vehicles, and for consumption goods. How are we doing this? Additional liquidity support for HFCs, home finance corporations, for rupees 20,000 crores by the National Housing Bank and thereby increasing it to 30,000 crores, which is an increase which we are making now. All pending GST refunds due to MSMEs, till now that is, shall be paid within 30 days. Everything that is pending since I don't know how many years, from the time of introduction, let us say, of the GST, from then till today, whoever has got a pending refund problem, it will be sorted out within 30 days from today. And from now, anything which arises newly, within 60 days, the refund for MSMEs will be done so that the MSMEs are not worried about money being stuck somewhere and they're not getting it. Delayed payments from government, CPSEs, to be monitored by Department of Expenditure and performance reviewed by the Cabinet Secretariat with a dashboard in front of it. Money actually not getting locked up, liquidity reaching where it should reach. And I'm sure with the Cabinet Secretariat monitoring it, secretary expenditure should be, except in those cases which are under litigation, clear up all the due payments. BS4 vehicles which are purchased up to 2020 March will all remain operational for their entire period of registration. So it's not as if from 2020 BS4 vehicles are all off the road, not at all. As long as their registration is on, they will be allowed and they will be as good as any other vehicle. On the registration fee being asked up front and so on, we have deferred it till June 2020. There is no need on that to have any worry. An additional 15% depreciation on all vehicles, not only this, not only that, on all vehicles to increase it to 30% acquired during the period from now till March 2020. Both EVs and the internal combustion vehicles will continue to be registered. So the fear that what happens to my BS4 vehicle need not be in anybody's mind. The government's focus will be on setting up infrastructure for development of ancillaries and components, including batteries for export. So government departments, which till now had a ban on them, that they can't buy vehicles even to replace the old ones, will now be actively told to please replace your old ones. Please replace your old one, go buy new vehicles, bring them on. So the inventory to that extent will be first we start the charity at home. We still don't have the infrastructure for dealing with scrap vehicles. We are holding on, but we shall hopefully come with the scrappage for policy sooner so that road unworthy vehicles or old vehicles can all be sent not to be recycled again, creating greater pollution problem, but to be completely scrapped. On the home buyers, we've had consultations, particularly for the home buyers who have problems in the NCR, and therefore it will also have a bearing in Mumbai, where a lot of home buyers have paid their advances and they are sitting without knowing what to do, and the promoters are sitting with no money to further their projects. We've had discussions. We are also very close to coming up with some solution. This is only a start. Today we've come with a set of our responses. Sooner the next week again, I do not want to give a date even now, but next week again, we shall be coming with one more set of announcements. One more set of announcements by middle of next week. Soon after that, I hope to come with another more set of announcements. So you can expect to have us come and talk to you twice more in the near future, which will take care of the other issues which are pending.
So the FM has promised to come back to us with more announcements for you. In the meanwhile, let's get you reactions from a market veteran, an auto industry veteran, and an economist on the various measures that she announced on Friday.
It's a very positive step taken by the Honorable Finance Minister and the whole Finance Ministry team. Only one caveat here is basically we have only seen that the surcharge is out from capital gains perspective and not from all the Category 3 AIFs. So Category 3 AIFs also do generate business income, right? So all the long-short funds and the hedge funds actually, would still be charged at a higher surcharge. For the FPI, it's a welcome step. So we are waiting for further clarity on that as well. Only clarity we are hoping for is basically that all the Category 3 AIFs, irrespective of kind of income they generate, would be out of the surcharge. At this point in time, as we speak or as we know, it is restricted to capital gains, which is long-term and short-term, but not to the business income. And in a Category 3 AIF, some income is in the nature of derivatives income, which is treated as business income. Okay. So that is the clarity which we seek for.
The sentiment for purchase of automobiles is a major thing. And the announcements by the finance minister in very clear terms have made it absolutely evident to people that IC vehicles are not vehicles which are going out or something's going to happen to them in the near future. The decision that government will immediately start buying cars, and these will be IC cars, sends a very strong message to the people that the policy relating to IC vehicles is very positive. And I think that's a big step which has been taken.
Yeah.
The financing costs have been brought down. That's the other thing. So scrappage policy will immediately give a fillip to demand because of the scrappage of old vehicles. But it all depends on the details of the policy and of the infrastructure which exists for implementing it. It's not easy to suddenly implement a scrappage policy. You may announce the policy, but the implementation will take time. But again, a scrappage policy announcement itself will help you change sentiment. The real step which I'm hoping will now be taken will be by some of the state governments who have increased road tax recently. And I hope they see the approach of the central government and understand that they have also to help in reviving industry. And they also roll back, like registration charges, the road taxes which they have imposed recently.
The bigger issue is how do you put money into the hands of people to buoy and boost the demand side of story, and that is something which is going to be a longer playing story, because we need to see all those cash transfers, all the rural economy monies that have been promised to see the light of the day in earlier part of the FY20, so that some demand is more visible, particularly starting the festive season, October, December. So I would say, Ida, that these coming 40 days are going to be very, very critical as to how both the demand side and the supply side are fashioned to bring in growth, at least in the H2 of the fiscal year. Remember, the first half is nearly significant slowing of growth momentum from 5.8 of the previous quarter. The first quarter we are penciling in a 5.5% growth of GDP. The second quarter is not likely to have any significant upside. So it leaves a lot of hope and expectations towards the second half of the year, which, if the government really does deliver on these measures over the next 30 to 40 days, I would think there would be at least an arrest of the expectation of a continuing downturn or downdraft in terms of growth momentum. But having said, I think most of us analysts have looked to revise our GDP much lower. In fact, in our earlier show with you on the Monetary Policy Day, we did say that RBI's 6.9 GDP for the year looks a little tad ambitious, and we were all in the process of marking down because of the first half of a fairly concerning slowdown of the economic momentum. So 40 days and then we are all set. Monsoon has been positive. Oil has once again become a more supportive factor. If the consumption loans continue to get lower, that will to some extent help the demand side, but we would all be looking more closely as to how these measures on the ground translate into some high frequency numbers over the next 40 days.
All right, let's turn to the Indian markets now. Agam Vakil is here to tell you all about the day's trade and also what's happening in the futures and options space. Agam, as of now, it's red across the board in Asia, following red across the board in the US, and seemingly the only green spot is what the SGX Nifty is indicating, and that's because of what was announced on Friday.
Yeah, Alex, that is true, and there's going to be a lot of expectation in today's market. But again, I would ask all the traders to be nimble, because you never know, things may change. There is weakness and slowdown in the economy. And even though there's a slew of measures that's been announced by the FM, well, you're going to have to take cognizance of how the market movements are panning out today. That said, we certainly are looking at a possibility of a very strong opening today, indicated by a 0.5% gain on the SGX Nifty futures. And we do know that we had seen a little bit of that up move already come through and play out last Friday. So we did have the Nifty advance by around 0.8%, and mid-cap and the small-cap indices advancing. The banking indices is also largely moving in tandem, at least as far as the PSU banking index is concerned, not so much for the Nifty bank index. But ADRs for now are all up and about, at least most of them. We are seeing good gains in Vedanta and ICICI Bank. Watch out for that. And in terms of some of those other counters showing a little bit of weakness would include Infosys, Wipro, and Dr. Reddy's. But let's talk about how we're seeing flows pan out. And last Friday, we still did see 1,700 crores worth of FIs sell, despite the fact that the indices advanced. And against that, we had DII buy number of around 1,548 crores. So there'll be several factors that will be playing out in the markets. Let's just keep an eye on how things shape up through the course of the day. Again, we did see a lot of the heavyweights, advance in trade. So Reliance, HDFC Limited, TCS, Infosys, all aiding the indices higher. But we don't have too much to speak for otherwise. Let's talk about your futures and options space. Did things change substantially? Well, possibly yes, considering we did see short covering, last Friday in the Nifty futures. And the Nifty banking futures also saw a decline of around 4.5%, but that was on a negative move. So that was longs which were unwound. For now, 11,000 call remains the one with the max open interest, and that will serve as a near-term resistance. And in terms of the change in open interest, again, as one might expect, some unwinding coming through in puts, considering we did see, the Nifty advance. And to talk about your wicks, that came off too by as much as 3%. Should we see strength in the indices today? We may very well see the wicks come off even further in today's day of trade. And as far as the put call ratio is concerned, that remains unchanged, but it's a very neutral level of 1. So the markets can go either ways from here on. Moving on, let's talk about the One Housing Finance and IDBI Bank, which remain in the F&O ban. Restricted trade there among stocks. Other than that, we're keeping an eye on DLF, Federal Bank, and Havells India, seeing an increase in open interest. But as you can see, that the increase has not been substantial. On the other hand, a substantial amount of unwinding coming along for JSW Steel, Grasim, and MCX India. So yes, Alex, while we are expecting a very strong opening, I would still suggest traders take cognizance of the fact that there's a lot of volatility around globally.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Agam. All right, let's, on that note, take a look at what's making headlines across the globe. Paul Allen of Bloomberg News brings you the first word headlines.
Attacks on global tech and potential duties on French wine were on the menu as the G7 wound up in Biarritz. The proposal to impose taxes on tech companies that make substantial revenue in France has infuriated the Trump administration, prompting threats of 100% tariffs on wine imports. France insists the tax plan doesn't specifically target US firms such as Google, Amazon, and Uber. French President Emmanuel Macron also raised some eyebrows at the G7 by inviting the Iranian foreign minister for a last-minute sideline meeting. France said the arrangement with Mohammad Javad Zarif was a bid to de-escalate international tensions with Iran. The two met for only 30 minutes before Zarif left again. The French team said the other G7 leaders were told in advance that he was coming. Hong Kong police are defending an officer's decision to fire his gun as, quote, the best option, as clashes with protesters escalated overnight. At a press briefing a few hours ago, police said the action was necessary as protesters were charging them. Police say they have arrested 36 people following the Sunday protests, and that included several violent clashes in the Western New Territories. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Paul Allen. This is Bloomberg.
Let's talk about that last update that Paul spoke about, where in Hong Kong protesters turned violent yet again after the police fired shots at protesters. China has given its strongest signal yet that it may have to intervene in the crisis. Stephen Engel of Bloomberg News brings us more.
Friday night, we had this fairly peaceful human chain across all of Hong Kong. That demonstration went off without a hitch, really. It was quite something. But then on Saturday, and then you're seeing the footage of Sunday last night, quite violent again. 6 police officers had to draw their sidearms. The senior police superintendent, Yolanda Yu, defending one officer's decision to actually fire a live round into the air because the officer's life was, quote, in great danger. And basically, the Hong Kong government is also saying that these violent acts over the weekend push Hong Kong to a dangerous edge. Now, another 36 arrests on Sunday on top of more than 24 arrests on Saturday. 15 officers, according to the Hong Kong police, were injured in the, if you want to call it a melee, yesterday on the streets of the New Territories, and also on Saturday, eastern Kowloon and Kowloon Bay, where frustrations on both sides are definitely boiling over. Protesters had charged a fallen officer with metal pipes and other weapons, including bricks and also Molotov cocktails, petrol bombs, in other words. And basically, of course, Friday protests were peaceful. Saturday and Sunday, far from it.
Now, after the sharp correction that the U.S. market saw on Friday, the futures currently are not painting a pretty picture either. Both the S&P and Dow futures are trading with cuts after President Trump, in a series of tweets, attacked Fed Chair Jerome Powell post his Jackson Hole address. He asked in a tweet who the real enemy to the U.S. is, whether it was Jay Powell or Chairman Xi of China. Kathleen Hayes brings you more details.
This is the speech everybody was waiting for in the U.S. and around the world. Jay Powell is Fed chair. Traditionally, as the Fed chair always does, kicking off the 2-day symposium with a speech that people are saying, will he signal a rate hike? You can see him walking along with Mark Carney, still president of the Bank of England, and he did, in fact, open the door to a rate cut. He cited slowing global growth, trade uncertainty, muted inflation, and need to look ahead, even if the economy looks solid now. Let's look at something he said that is so important, because it's also this focus on trade that apparently got Donald Trump going. Trade policy uncertainty seems to be playing a role in the global slowdown and in weak manufacturing and capital spending in the United States. Now, that's no surprise. Everyone agrees on that. And then he went on to say that thing he said before, which is that we will act as appropriate to sustain the economic expansion. So people take this as a sign that he is on the side at the Fed that is getting ready for a rate cut. So what happens next? Trump blasted Powell in a way that we have hardly ever seen. And this did happen as stocks had been rallying on Powell's comments. Let's look at what Donald Trump tweeted out. So what he said, as usual, the Fed did nothing. Let's pause on that. Everybody at Jackson Hole was going, oh my gosh, Donald Trump must have thought this was a Fed meeting and they didn't cut their rate. Then he confused Jackson Hole in this speech, and so, but then he went on to say other things, including we have a very strong dollar, a very weak Fed. I will work brilliantly with both, and the U.S. will do great. Let's look at this. This is what really got people's attention. My only question is, who is our bigger enemy, Jay Powell or Chairman Xi? And I think it's clear that those tariffs, that's what hit the stock market. But nevertheless, I think this is another thing. And kind of uniformly, people their mouths were hanging open. What's going on? They were gas concerned. But anyway, it was just really an interesting morning in Jackson Hole, and clearly something the markets were paying attention to.
All right, back to India now. Soumit Sarkar is here to tell you all about the stocks in news. Good morning, Soumit. What's on your list today?
Good morning, Alex. On the stocks in news, firstly, Mindtree will remain in focus because the company in its analyst meet, the new CEO has pointed out their roadmap going forward. Now, they're saying that their immediate area of focus will be revenue growth and delivering sequential improvement in margins. Along with that, the key focus of the company will also remain on boosting client and employee confidence. Now, the company is confident of delivering the guidance that it had given earlier, while it also says that Mindtree will continue to operate independently, and any future possibility of a merger with L&T Infotech currently remains unknown. The second stock that will remain in focus is Reliance Capital, because CARE Ratings has downgraded its rating on the long-term debt bonds, market-linked debentures and subordinate debt of the company to CARE BB, but it has revised the rating outlook to stable. Now, the change in rating is due to revision in timelines of divestment, deterioration of its standalone financial performance, increasing leverage and reduction in profitability due to impairment of assets. Now, the company says that they are working diligently to ensure timely debt repayments and is regular in all its debt payments currently. That's what the company is saying. Now, DHFL will also remain in focus because the company has defaulted in payments of non-convertible debentures interest and bond interest worth nearly 11 crore rupees and 51 crore rupees, which were due on August 22nd and August 23rd. Adani Ports will also remain in focus because the company has announced its buyback opening date, that is around on September 6th, and it will close on September 20th. The buyback size is close to 1,960 crore rupees. Couple of stocks that will remain in focus, couple of pharma stocks that would remain in focus. Firstly, Ipca Labs. Now, the company says that US FDA has issued a Form 483 with 3 observations after conducting inspection of its manufacturing facility situated in Silvassa from August 19 to August 23rd. Secondly, Alchem Labs will also remain in focus because they have received 2 Form 483, one for its US plants while the second was for its Baddi facility in India. Now, for US plant, it has received nearly 4 observations, but for the Baddi facility it has received 0 observations. That's what the company is saying. Lastly, couple of stocks that would remain in focus because of CCI approval that has come in. Firstly, for acquisition of shares of International Paper by West Coast Paper Mills. So these 2 stocks would remain in focus. Secondly, HDFC would also remain in focus because CCI has approved acquisition of 51.2% stake of Apollo Munich by HDFC and a subsequent merger of Apollo Munich into HDFC Ergo. So these stocks will also remain in focus in trade today.
Thanks so much for that, Somit. Now, former Finance Minister Arun Jaitley was laid to rest on Sunday afternoon at Nigambodh Ghat. Jaitley passed away on Saturday afternoon at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, or AIIMS, after a prolonged illness. He was 66 years old and he was admitted to AIIMS on the 9th of August after he complained of difficulty in breathing. Here's a look at his political journey. Listen in also to what political leaders from both his party and the opposition had to say about Arun Jaitley's contributions to the country's politics.
He was known for his articulation. He's an outstanding parliamentarian, legal luminary, powerful intellectual, and an able administrator, and a man of impeccable integrity. He worked under Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji and Sri Narendra Bhai Modi, dealt with many important portfolios. And as a minister, he has done an excellent work to the satisfaction of one and all.
देश के नामवंत वकीलों में पहले 2-3 लोगों में उनका नाम था. उनको आर्गुमेंट करने की एक उपजत कला उनमें थी. राज्यसभा में विपक्ष के नेता के रूप में और भारतीय जनता पार्टी को लगातार विस्तार करने में उनके कार्य कर्तृत्व में उनका बहुत बड़ा योगदान था. विशेष रूप से भारतीय जनता पार्टी का मैं जब अध्यक्ष था, 3 साल में अनेक प्रसंग, समस्या, संकटों पर उनसे सलाह लेकर मैं काम करता था। पार्टी के विचारधारा के प्रति समर्पित ऐसा उनका व्यक्तित्व था।
अरुण जी के साथ हमने 40 साल से अधिक समय काम किया था, विद्यार्थी परिषद के समय से। जितनी उनकी बौद्धिक प्रतिभा थी, जितनी उनमें क्षमता थी, बड़े वकील थे, बड़े सांसद थे, योग्य मंत्री थे और हमारी पार्टी के वरिष्ठ नेता थे।
एक बहुत परिपक्व और बहुत सुलझे हुए, बहुत हुनर वाले वकील थे वो। एक बहुत ज़बरदस्त प्रतिभाशाली राजनीतिज्ञ थे और एक विशाल हृदय के व्यक्ति थे।
ये बहुत दुख की बात है, देश के लिए एक बहुत बड़ी क्षति हुई है। अरुण जेटली जी एक बड़े योग्य राजनेता थे और उनका योगदान भारत की राजनीति में सदैव याद रहेगा। एक मंत्री के रूप में, विपक्ष के नेता में उन्होंने जो काम किया वो सराहनीय है। और एक ऐसे समय में जब उनकी, मैं समझता हूँ, बहुत ज़रूरत थी, तो वो चले गए। उनमें वो क्षमता थी कि वो राजनीतिक लकीरों से अलग हटके लोगों से बात कर सके और बड़े महत्वपूर्ण विषयों पर इसी सरकार में, जो पिछली सरकार थी, आम सहमति बनाने के लिए उनकी भूमिका बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण रही है, क्योंकि उन्होंने हर दल में उनकी मित्रता और संबंध थे। जहां वो अपने दल के लिए पूरी तरह से समर्पित थे, वहीं उन्होंने कभी कोई ऐसी बात नहीं की जिससे कटुता या कड़वाहट हो।
It was not a political friendship. We had, unfortunately, very many different points of view on national politics. But at the social level, it was a very pleasant relationship. Arun, I will remember in many ways as a consummate Delhi insider, somebody who was completely at home in Lutyens, Delhi, that many people in his own party feel uncomfortable with, but he was totally at ease with everybody. He knew everybody. He was a gregarious person who enjoyed being in social occasions. And very often when he was at these parties, he was the life and soul of it.
अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर भी उनकी एक ख्याति थी और अपने राजनीतिक जीवन में उन्होंने यहाँ संगठन के लिए भी अपनी जिम्मेदारी का निर्वाह किया है। वहीं पर सत्ता में रहकर भी उनके कंट्रीब्यूशन को यह देश कभी भूल नहीं सकता है। और मैं मानता हूं कि वो पार्टी के लिए भी एसेट थे, गवर्नमेंट में रहते हुए वह एसेट थे और साथ ही साथ देश के भी वह एक एसेट थे। अब वो हमारे बीच नहीं रहे, मैं उन्हें अपनी हार्दिक श्रद्धांजलि अर्पित करता हूं।
Now, while a lot of us were glued to the Ashes test last evening, in some great news for badminton lovers, PV Sindhu won the gold medal at the BWF World Championships, defeating Japan's Nozomi Okuhara 21-7, 21-7 in the final of the women's singles. Contesting her third straight final at the tournament, Sindhu became the first Indian woman to win gold at the event. Well, that's all that we have for you in this edition of All You Need to Know, but do stay tuned. There's a lot more coming up in just a short while. Thanks so much for watching. This is Bloomberg Quint.